The old saloon door swung open with a creak that cut through the thick smoke and stale whiskey fumes like a knife through butter. Sarah flinched at the sound. 3 years of living in fear had taught her that every unexpected noise meant danger. Every footstep could belong to him. She kept her eyes down, scrubbing at a stain on the bar that would never come out, her hands trembling despite her best efforts to still them. The bruise on her cheekbone throbbed, a fresh purple reminder of last night's rage, hidden poorly beneath the dusting of flowers she'd borrowed from the kitchen. She was 24 years old and felt ancient, hollowed out, a ghost wearing the skin of the girl she used to be. The stranger's boots were different. Sarah noticed that first how they moved across the floor with a quiet confidence, not the heavy, deliberate stomp of men looking to prove something. She risked a glance upward and immediately wished she hadn't. The cowboy stood silhouetted against the afternoon light streaming through the doorway, tall and lean, with eyes that seemed to take in everything without judgment. There was a kindness in his weathered face that made her chest ache with something she'd almost forgotten. Hope. "Water, please, Mom," he said, his voice soft as summer rain on parched earth. Sarah's hands shook as she poured, and she hated herself for it. The glass rattled against the bar top. From the corner of her eye, she saw Frank, her husband, her tormentor, her wardener, watching from his usual table in the corner. She could feel his gaze like hot coals pressed against her spine, could already anticipate the punishment for showing weakness in front of a customer. "Much obliged," the stranger said, and something in his tone made her look up again. His eyes had caught on her bruise, and she saw recognition there, not curiosity, but understanding. It was the look of someone who'd seen too much cruelty in the world and hadn't grown numb to it. The moment stretched between them like a thread pulled taut, ready to snap. Then Frank's chair scraped back. "Sarah," his voice boomed across the empty saloon, each syllable a threat. "Get over here." Now, her body moved before her mind could catch up. Years of conditioning overriding any thought of resistance. The cowboy's hand moved slightly, just a twitch toward his hip, but he stilled himself. Sarah appreciated that more than he could know. The last thing she needed was someone trying to be her hero. Heroes got hurt, heroes got killed, and then she'd be truly alone. "This here's my wife," Frank announced to the stranger, his meaty hand clamping onto Sarah's shoulder with bruising force. "Pretty thing, ain't she?" When she remembers her place. His fingers dug deeper, and Sarah bit the inside of her cheek to keep from crying out. "We don't need no drifters getting ideas in our establishment." The cowboy took a long, slow drink of his water. His expression unreadable. "Wasn't planning on staying long," he said evenly. "Just passing through on my way to Denver. Needed to rest my horse." Frank grunted, somewhat mollified but still territorial. "Well, you rest your horse and move on. We run a respectable place here." The hypocrisy of the statement would have been laughable if Sarah hadn't been living it. Frank released her shoulder with a shove that sent her stumbling. "Get back to work, and fix your face here. You look like hell." The cowboy's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but he said nothing. Sarah returned to the bar, shame burning hotter than her bruises. She'd become so good at being invisible, at making herself small and quiet and compliant. But something about the stranger's presence made her acutely aware of her degradation in a way she usually managed to push aside. The saloon remained quiet for the next hour. The stranger sat at the bar nursing a second glass of water, occasionally making polite small talk that Sarah answered in monosyllables. Frank dozed in his corner, a bottle of whiskey cradled in his lap like a child. It was during these moments of Frank's stupor that Sarah allowed herself to breathe, to exist without constantly calculating her next move to avoid his wrath. "Name's Matthew," the cowboy finally said, his voice low enough that Frank wouldn't hear. "Matthew Carson." Sarah glanced nervously toward her husband, but his snores rattled the air. "Sarah," she whispered back, then immediately regretted it. What was she doing, giving her name to a stranger? Frank would. "Sarah's a good name," Matthew said simply. "My mother's name was Sarah, strongest woman I ever knew." Something in her chest cracked. "Was died when I was 12. Fever took her." He paused, studying the glass in his hands. My father was a hard man, mean drunk. I watched him break her spirit long before the fever broke her body. The words hung between them, heavy with shared understanding. Sarah's eyes burned with unshed tears. I'm sorry, she managed. Don't be sorry for things that ain't your fault, Matthew said, and his gaze lifted to meet hers. And don't be sorry for things that are happening to you neither. You hear me? None of this is your fault. The tears spilled over then, silent tracks down her bruised cheeks. She turned away quickly, pretending to organize bottles behind the bar, but her shoulders shook with suppressed sobs. It had been so long since anyone had shown her kindness, had seen her as human rather than property. She'd almost forgotten that such gentleness existed in the world. Sarah. Frank's voice cut through the moment like a whip crack. He was awake, his bloodshot eyes fixed on her with suspicion. What are you crying about now? Always crying, always complaining. Get upstairs and make yourself useful. Got laundry needs doing. Sarah moved automatically toward the stairs at the back of the saloon, keeping her head down. As she passed Frank's table, his hand shot out and grabbed her wrist, yanking her close enough that she could smell the whiskey on his breath. And if I catch you making eyes at that cowboy again, he hissed, his fingers grinding the delicate bones of her wrist, I'll make last night look like a love tap. You understand me? Yes, Frank, she whispered, hating how small her voice sounded, hating herself for her fear. He released her with a shove, and she hurried upstairs, her wrist already swelling. In the dim privacy of their room, though it felt more like a cellar, Sarah sank onto the bed and let herself cry properly. She cried for the girl she'd been before Frank, the one who'd believed in love and kindness and happy endings. She cried for the 3 years of beatings and humiliation, for the way he'd systematically isolated her from everyone she knew, for the bruises that never seemed to fully heal before new ones appeared. She cried because a stranger's kindness had reminded her of everything she'd lost. The door flew open. Sarah scrambled to her feet, wiping frantically at her face, but Frank was already there, his face purple with rage. Crying again? He snarled. What have you got to cry about? I give you a roof over your head, food in your belly, and this is how you repay me? By embarrassing me in front of customers? I wasn't her, I didn't. His fist connected with her ribs before she could finish. The air left her lungs in a whoosh, and she crumpled to the floor. This was the worst time, when he was drunk enough to be mean but not so drunk that he was clumsy. He knew exactly where to hit to maximize pain while minimizing visible marks. You think you can do better than me? Another kick, this time to her back. You think some cowboy is gonna save you? You're nothing, Sarah. Nothing without me. Who'd want a broken, useless thing like you? She curled into herself, trying to protect her vital organs, waiting for it to be over. This was survival. This was Tuesday. This was her life. The beating stopped abruptly. Through the ringing in her ears, Sarah heard heavy footsteps on the stairs, then Frank's startled curse. She forced her eyes open in time to see Matthew Carson standing in the doorway, his expression carved from granite, his hand resting on the revolver at his hip. Step away from her, Matthew said, his voice deadly calm. Frank laughed, but there was nervousness in it. This ain't your business, cowboy. She's my wife. I can discipline my own wife in my own home. That ain't discipline. That's murder, slow and mean. Matthew took a step into the room. Now you got two choices. You can walk away right now, get on your horse, and ride out of town. Or you can reach for that gun on your belt, and we'll see how fast you really are. You threatening me? Frank's voice rose, blustery with false bravado. In my own place? I'm giving you a chance to do the right thing. That's more than you deserve. Frank's hand twitched toward his gun. The movement was clumsy, telegraphed, the action of a bully who'd never faced real opposition. Matthew's draw was liquid smooth, his revolver clearing leather and leveling at Frank's chest before Sarah could blink. The click of the hammer cocking back was the loudest sound in the world. Don't, Matthew said quietly. Please don't make me. Frank froze, his gun half drawn, his face going pale beneath its permanent flush. He was a coward, Sarah realized. She'd always known it on some level, but seeing him face someone who wasn't afraid crystallized the truth. He only hit people who couldn't hit back. Put the gun on the floor, Matthew instructed. Slow. Frank complied, his hands shaking. The gun clattered on the wooden boards. Now pack a bag and get out. You got 5 minutes. This is my saloon. You can't have 4 minutes. Frank looked at Sarah, still huddled on the floor, and something ugly flickered across his face. But he turned and started grabbing clothes from the dresser, shoving them into a worn saddlebag. His movements were jerky, angry, but he didn't argue anymore. The revolver trained on his back was argument enough. When Frank stomped past Matthew and down the stairs, Matthew didn't lower his gun until they heard the front door slam. Even then, he kept it ready. His attention split between the window and Sarah. He's riding out, Matthew said after a long moment. Headed east. Only then did he holster the weapon and turn fully to Sarah. His expression softened immediately. Can you stand? Are you hurt bad? Sarah tried to push herself up and gasped as pain lanced through her ribs. Matthew moved to help her, but stopped himself, his hands hovering uncertainly. May I? He asked, and even in her pain, Sarah felt a rush of gratitude for the request, for treating her like a person who had a say in what happened to her body. She nodded, and he helped her gently to the bed, his touch careful and impersonal. We need to get you to a doctor, he said. No money, Sarah managed through gritted teeth. I got money. Why? The word burst out of her. Why are you doing this? You don't know me. I'm nobody. Matthew pulled the room's single chair over and sat down, giving her space. When I was 12 and my mama died, I swore 2 things. First, that I'd never be like my father. And second, that if I ever had the chance to help someone in the same situation, I would. Not for glory, not for thanks. Just because it's the right thing to do. He paused, his eyes distant. I couldn't save my mama, but maybe I can help you. Fresh tears came, but they were different now, mixed with something Sarah hadn't felt in years. Relief, hope, the possibility of a future that didn't include fists and fear. He'll come back, she whispered. He'll be angry. He'll kill us both. Maybe. Matthew's expression was serious. Which is why, after we get you to a doctor, I'm gonna teach you to shoot. And I'm gonna stay in town for a spell. Make sure he knows there's consequences if he shows his face again. I can't ask you to. You didn't ask. I'm offering. He stood up. Now let's get you to that doctor. We can talk about everything else after. The next weeks blurred together in a haze of healing and learning. The doctor, a kind woman named Harriet, who asked no questions and accepted Matthew's payment with a knowing nod, confirmed that Sarah had 3 cracked ribs, extensive bruising, and signs of old injuries that had healed poorly. She wrapped Sarah's ribs, gave her laudanum for the pain, and told her in no uncertain terms that she was lucky to be alive. Matthew was true to his word. He rented a room at the boarding house but spent most of his time at the saloon, which was technically Sarah's now. Frank's name wasn't on the deed, only hers, a fact she'd discovered in the town registry office. Her father had left her the building, and Frank had simply taken control of it along with everything else in her life. You got a business here if you want it, Matthew said one afternoon as they stood behind the bar. Sarah was practicing her draw with an unloaded revolver, the movements still awkward but improving. Or you could sell it, start fresh somewhere else. Sarah paused, the gun heavy in her hand. I don't know who I am anymore, she admitted. Without Frank telling me what to do, what to think, who to be. It's terrifying. Reckon that's normal? Matthew said. You've been living in a cage. Freedom's scary when you're not used to it, but you'll figure it out. You're stronger than you think. How do you know? Because you survived. That takes strength most people can't imagine. As the days turned to weeks, something shifted in Sarah. The bruises faded from purple to yellow to gone. Her ribs healed. She started making decisions, small ones at first, like what to cook for dinner or when to open the saloon, then bigger ones. She hired 2 women from town who needed work, both of them worn down by their own hard lives. She stopped serving the meanest drunks. She painted the exterior a cheerful yellow that made the building stand out on the dusty street. Matthew stayed, helping where he could but never overstepping, never trying to control. He fixed the squeaky door, reinforced the bar, built new shelves. In the evenings, they'd sit on the porch and talk about everything and nothing. His years working ranches across the West, her childhood before Frank, their dreams for a world kinder than the one they'd known. "You don't have to stay," Sarah told him one evening, though her heart ached at the thought of him leaving. "Frank hasn't shown his face in over a month. I think he's really gone." Matthew was quiet for a long moment, watching the sunset over the mountains. "What if I want to stay?" he finally said. "Not because I think you need protecting, but because I've been drifting for 15 years, and this is the first place that's felt like it could be home." Sarah's breath caught. "Matthew, I'm not asking for anything," he said quickly. "I know you need time. Lord knows you've earned the right to figure out who you are without some man hanging around. I'd like to be your friend, if you'll have me. And maybe, someday, if you ever wanted something more, well, I'd be honored." Sarah reached over and took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "I'd like that," she said softly. "The friend's part, definitely, and maybe, someday, the rest too. But Matthew, thank you for seeing me when I'd become invisible, for helping me remember I'm human." He squeezed her hand gently. "Thank you for letting me." 6 months later, Sarah's Saloon was the most popular establishment in town, known for good food, fair prices, and a strict no-nonsense policy about how men treated women. She'd taken shooting lessons until she could outshoot most of the men who came through the door, and everyone knew it. She wore her competence like armor, but underneath, she was learning to be soft again, to laugh again, to trust again. Matthew had taken a job at the ranch outside town but still came by every evening. Their relationship was developing slowly, built on respect and genuine affection rather than need or desperation. He courted her properly: flowers, walks, conversations that lasted until the stars came out. He never pushed, never demanded, never made her feel like she owed him anything for the kindness he'd shown. On a warm spring evening, as they sat on the porch watching fireflies dance in the dusk, Sarah turned to Matthew and said, "I love you. I need you to know that. I love you for who you are, not for what you did for me, though I'm grateful for that too." Matthew's smile was brighter than the fireflies. "I love you too, Sarah. Have for months now. Just didn't want to say it until you were ready to hear it." "I'm ready," she said, and realized it was true. She was ready for love, ready for joy, ready for a life built on choice rather than fear. When they kissed, it was gentle and sweet and full of promise, not an ending, but a beginning. Sarah had survived 3 years of hell and come out the other side. She'd discovered strength she didn't know she had and learned that kindness, real kindness, still existed in the world. She'd lost herself and found herself again, and this time, she knew exactly who she was. She was Sarah Carson, owner, businesswoman, survivor, and sooner when she and Matthew said their vows in front of the whole town, a beloved wife to a man who treated her like the precious gift she was. The scars would always be there, physical and emotional, but they were proof of her survival, not symbols of her defeat. She'd walked through fire and emerged transformed, not broken, but forged into something unbreakable. And it all started because a cowboy walked through the door and reminded her what humanity looked like.